Welcome to the Future is Borderless podcast with David Nilsson. We feature top entrepreneurs and thought leaders from around the world, those who bring a global mindset and a unique perspective to their life and business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hey, I'm David Nilsson and the host of this show where we connect with business leaders who have what I call a borderless mindset. And we're trying to build or bring visibility into new ideas, new innovations, best practices, things that can be put to work in your personal and professional life, which will help us as business leaders thrive in a fast-moving world. Now, the episode is brought to you by Doxa Talent. Doxa Talent helps business leaders find full-time, dedicated, highly skilled workers in the Philippines, and it includes everything from accountants to executive assistants, sales development reps, even software engineers. Now, as a result of building an offshore capability, the companies that they serve can scale faster, increase margin, and improve culture. And if you want to learn more about Doxa, you can visit doxatalent.com. Now, I'm really excited for today's episode because Theresa Fette is a really strong leader with an industry presence who, after seeing what I would call significant success of her own, is now trying to foster that same success in future financial service providers with innovative solutions. Now, as the CEO of Provident Trust Group, she helped grow assets to more than $7.5 billion before selling it in 2018. But she also realized that she had more to contribute to the industry. So that's where she decided to launch a company called Digital Trust to provide some financial technology solutions for custodial and financial service sectors. Now, she's a practicing attorney. She's a master's in accountancy, a master's in law, and she was named one of the top 10 most powerful women entrepreneurs by Fortune magazine. So a total underachiever. And I will just fully admit for this that I founded co-founded a business in 2003 called Guidant Financial. At one point, Guidant Financial was partners with Provident. So I've actually, as a result of that, developed a nice friendship that has lasted over time. And so I'm super excited to have Theresa on the call. So welcome to the show.
And thank you, David. That was quite the introduction. Thank you.
I know it's always awkward when I read through the bios, but I appreciate you bearing with me. But it's funny because most of the time when I bring people on, I interview them and I'm less familiar with their story. So this is going to be fun for me because it means I get to go a little bit deeper, a little bit faster than I normally would. So I thought actually I'd start with, you were ranked as one of the top 10 most powerful woman entrepreneurs by Fortune, which, by the way, is a huge honor. I'd love to just sort of understand, what is your superpower? You think about, they say powerful, but I'm just going to say, what is that thing that makes you so unique?
I think it's hard for me to identify. I think I know what makes me unique and powerful. I do have the ability to connect strategy and people really quickly. I do think I'm more of a startup to maintenance phase CEO, someone that comes in, builds, and then when it's just humming, then it's usually time for me to exit because it's ready for another CEO to do that piece. But I do see kind of puzzle pieces in my head come together. That's what I've been told by, employees and clients, that I can see those things kind of before they can sometimes.
Yeah, it's interesting. My experience, just knowing you, is that you have the ability to play at an extremely high level. But I mean, given your background, you also can get into the details if you have to, which is a little bit scary. But one of the things I was curious about is one of my favorite speakers years ago was this guy named Dave Rendell, who he basically says that your superpower can also be your greatest curse. So a lot of times people are when they're growing up in school, like he used to say, my teacher would say, you can't sit down and you can't shut up. And he's like, and now I'm a public speaker. So I guess it worked out for me, right? Yeah. And I remember one time when I was a kid, early in my career, my boss at one point told me that I had the power to lift up a city or bring it to its knees, depending on where my energy was put. So I'm just curious, if you think about your superpower, how does that manifest itself under stress? What do you have to be careful of?
It's so funny because I've actually used that a different way of saying it. I always say what makes us great also makes us bad. What makes us good makes us bad. And and I'd always been told that by mentors is that whatever your superpower is also your weakness. So though I can put all these puzzle pieces together and drive people in a certain direction, my alter ego is also called the Dragon Lady. and so when I'm trying to drive in a certain focused direction, and I can definitely come at it with a aggression, I think. And the older I get, that piece kind of, smooths over a little bit. I think I've learned to mature on how to keep the Dragon Lady at bay, because motivating people through inspiration is a lot more than fear. So I definitely think like some of my superpowers, my resilience, I think that's one of my superpowers, just growing up the way that I did and having to reinvent and try to figure your own way out. But then I also think that I'll continue trying at things too many times, right? And it was actually a mentor, Tim Draper, actually asked me one day, he said, Theresa, you define success, but when do you sit down and define failure? And it was the first time in my career where I really thought about like, well, what does failure look like? And is it giving up? Or is it really just saying like, I need to put this thing to bed and not continue to try to bring it to life if it's just not going to go there? So that was a big learning lesson for me about like the superpower piece of it. Like resilience, not always a positive thing, right?
I love that. It's funny. I actually really love that quote, and I am going to steal that for sure, because I think we do spend a lot of time defining what success looks like. But on the flip side, there's this sort of mantra that we use, which is fail faster, right? Like, but oftentimes you don't define like at what point do you need to recalibrate the strategy or abandon it altogether and start again. So I think that's really sage advice. You made a comment a second ago about the way that you grew up is somehow impacted who you are today or how you've operated historically, which I guess shouldn't be, it should go without saying, but I'm just curious, like what unique experiences did you have as a younger individual that sort of formed that?
Well, I grew up in Arkansas. People are surprised because I have no accent. My dad was American and my mom is Vietnamese, and I grew up with 5 brothers and sisters. When you grow up with a Vietnamese mom, I tell people I'm half Vietnamese and half German, and I'm engineered to be this way. So my mom was I wouldn't even call her the tiger mom. I'd actually say I inherited my Dragon Lady from my mother. And it was difficult, the expectation she had for us. And, she succeeded because 6 kids, we all make over 6 figures. Nobody went to prison. I think those are all positive things. We're all very successful, functioning adults. But, growing up in a household like that, and my mom, there's Asian culture too. They definitely believe in like the rod, right? To get the child to do what you want them to do. So I grew up in a really, I guess some people call it abusive household, but my mom very much like loved us, right? Like she always thought that next beating would make us better, which in some ways it did. And I wouldn't be, I had my employees one day, somebody asked them to write down all Theresa's positive qualities, and I end up looking at them, and a lot of the qualities that people admired about me were either ones I did inherit from my mom or ones that were born out of the way that she raised us.
Yeah.
So I have a lot of gratitude for coming up the way that I did. I wouldn't be who I am if I didn't come up the way I did.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. And coming away from that experience, you then, you obviously went to college. It looks like maybe 3 to 4 times. You see, it's funny because I grew up as a kid always wanting to be an NBA basketball player. And when that didn't work out, I realized, well, maybe I'll be an entrepreneur because I don't really want to work for anybody. But you went to school for originally accounting and then law, and you've got your master's in both, and you're practicing law today. Like, at what point did you decide you wanted to go into that accounting and law track? I mean, was that always the dream, or was that just something that happened?
It was not. So in Asian culture, you have to be a doctor or a lawyer. And at first, I thought I wanted to be a doctor. So I'm only 15 hours shy of a biochem degree. And somewhere along the way, I realized, like, why am I killing myself? I Googled how much biochemists make, and they make like $20,000 a year at the time. I was like, why am I killing myself to make like no money? So I Googled what comes out of college making a lot more, just in case I didn't get into professional school. And accounting was one of the top professions. So I went into accounting, and it was really easy for me. I ended up pulling 4.0s without really trying. So it was just, I think, natural for my brain. And then I actually went to get my doctorate in physical therapy. I had a patient pass away in my first year, but I didn't leave until after the first year because I didn't want my mom to think I failed, right? So I finished that first year, got into debt for that first year, and then decided because my mom cried when I told her I was leaving physical therapy school. She ended up, I went to law school. But people had always told me since I was a little girl that I should be a lawyer because I thought I wanted to be first woman president of the United States of America. That's what, since I was 5 years old, that was on all my report cards with my teachers.
Well, there's still time.
I think I can let that one go.
I was going to say, I'm not sure our best and brightest would ever sign up for that job anyways. So that's a whole different story.
An attorney fits me. Like, they teach you critical thinking skills. And I don't know that I knew I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I kind of got pushed in that direction. I think I had a natural affinity for it, but not knowing what the word was. Right. And then when I got in there, my law degree was a perfect education for being an entrepreneur, teaching you to think on your feet, critical thinking, spotting issues, all of that type of stuff. So,
well, let's also face it. It saves a little bit of money in the startup phase too, because they don't come cheaply. Let's talk about that though, because you actually, I mean, it wasn't too long after school, I think, that you started Provident, right? This is the self-directed IRA custodian that you eventually sold in 2018. Like a lot of people that I talked to became entrepreneurs accidentally. Was Provident something you intentionally set out to do, or was it sort of the same thing?
It was absolutely accidental. Actually, I was a tax attorney. I had one business partner, and we were practicing out of Las Vegas doing tax law work. And then I had this client group. It was 2 or 3 people came in and asked me what an IRA LLC was. And I didn't know this at the time, but they had Googled IRA LLC expert, and my name came up. And at that time, I'm only like 27 years old, David. So I don't know how I was the expert in that, but somehow Google, the universe put that in their space. They asked me how to do an IRA LLC. I told them I'd charge them, $1,000, $1,500 to do the work. And then they asked for a second meeting. And I remember thinking to myself, like, this is just like one entity. I don't need to do 2 meetings because, attorneys get paid for their time. Right.
Yeah.
And then the second time they came back in, they offered me 50% of the company to run it. And you talk about being a kid. I was just a kid. And I did do M&A work and tax work. And actually we worked for really large, very wealthy clients. And funny enough, I walked into Jason's office. You remember my partner from Provident. And I said, I think we own half a trust company today. We did no due diligence. And had we done it, we probably wouldn't have bought it. Or went into the deal, but thank God we did, because it was life-changing for both of us.
Isn't that amazing? It's funny. We started Guidant Financial when I was 25 years old. So I became an expert in IRA LLCs at 25. So I'm with you. I know exactly how this story goes. You talked about Jason. Actually, I'd love to talk about that because, as you know, I've been business partners with the same person for 20 plus years right now. And you guys had a nice run, had a great exit. But, over the course of 20 years, I've seen the super majority of business partnerships that I've come in contact with erode over time. And sometimes it gets really, really ugly. But you guys had a good partnership, a great friendship. What do you think the key to success was for the two of you?
We actually, so I'm in a new partnership now. He didn't enter into my new thing. And I asked him to take a personality test just because somebody asked me who your perfect partner is. And Jason and I just had a beautiful partnership. So I asked him to take this personality test. And the lady called back and actually said, she said, no wonder he's the yin to your yang. She said, you're one of your superpowers is coming up with ideas and you need somewhere to throw them. And I do process out loud. And she said, he tests, obviously, you met Jason, he's incredibly intelligent. But she said, he's also a really good processor for me. So I throw the ideas at the wall. I always said, like, I came up with the ideas and he made them legal. And he was just always that. I think the other really positive thing about our partnership that I can really look back and have a lot of gratitude for today, he put a lot of work into our partnership like he did his own marriage. So, when we weren't getting along, he really worked to understand me, understand where that was coming from. Why was I communicating like that? The same for me with him. I tried to have understanding about where he was at and, what he might be going through. So I think we just had a deep appreciation for each other and a deep respect for what each other brought to the table. Yeah. And when you have that deep respect that's already there, I think it's kind of easy to build the partnership from there, which I know you and Jeremy have that same thing.
Absolutely. It's so funny because you said something that he and I often tell each other, which is you have to treat a business partnership sort of like a marriage. And it sounds, a little cliche, I guess, but it's really the idea is you have to invest in that relationship because, you are financially as married to your business partner as you might be to your spouse. In some cases, it's even more so. And, in that case, got to operate from a place where you're always assuming positive intent. And so that relationship becomes really important. I think that's at least what I would say the same, was what key to our success.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you talk about having a partner now. I'm not going to ask about that partner, but I do want to talk about digital trust. And digital trust is a relatively new business in the last, 2 or 3 years. Can you tell us a little bit about what is digital trust and what's the real problem you're solving, or why did you set out to take this on?
So digital trust came. So when my non-compete was coming due, I had a lot of people from the industry coming out and trying to talk to me about getting back in the industry. So I did have a reputation for kind of being the golden girl of self-directed IRAs, and I was getting recruited to go work with competitors. And it's something that I knew that I could do really well, that I could kind of do in my sleep a little bit, right? But then Camilo came along and he had this company called Bitcoin IRA. And he was doing cryptocurrency only. And at the end of Provident, we were building a digital asset division that before digital assets were cool, right? Nobody really knew what crypto or digital assets were. And so when Camilo came to me, it was just different enough and just exciting enough that I felt like, if I'm going to do this, I don't want to really do this for 5 to 10 more years and do the exact same thing. I want to do this and make a big splash and really do something that's going to change an industry. And crypto's changing an industry. And what my partners had built, they were the first crypto IRA company out there. They pretty much invented most of the products that were there. So they were innovative and all the things that I really value in partnership. And so we ended up forming Digital Trust as the custodian to Bitcoin IRA, because you need a custodian for IRA companies. And the idea behind Digital Trust is that we're able to service not just IRAs, but also different other things that digital assets may be from a fiduciary standpoint. And so it's really exciting to get back into an industry and where I kind of know what I'm doing, but I definitely wake up every morning and there's what we're doing in crypto. It's just whatever we did at Provident, it's like times 1,000 at digital. Things move faster. Crypto is just changing rapidly. I mean, you're watching the markets right now. It's just, it can be crazy what happens in a 30-day period. So it's definitely sharpened my entrepreneurial skills.
That's all. What's different this time around though? I mean, I know enough about the transaction, your exit, that you did very well for yourself. I'm like, this time around, like what's continuing to drive you to want to build and achieve, and how are you doing it differently?
I still think what my passion is building teams. So, I'm still doing that from coming back in, and I still get to look at my passion, which is going in and seeing people's light bulbs go on, right? Like when you see everybody move in the same direction and so you start from nothing and it becomes something. That's amazing. And I get a really good feeling from that. I get a really good feeling seeing an employee who has no college education and not, they thought the most they'd ever be is like working in the mailroom at somewhere. And then all of a sudden, they're head of something, after you've groomed them and trained them and they believe they can be something more. I still believe that that's my passion. But on this round, I will say we did it, when you've done it before, and I'm sure you feel like this, like going from doing guidance to Doxa, is that you can do things better, faster, cheaper the second time around because you're just smarter, more experienced. I don't know if you feel this way. It's 10 times more painful the second time around. Maybe I was too young to think about the pain or remember what the pain, maybe it's like having babies. I don't remember what the pain was like. But now definitely in my career, that it's painful some days to have to start from scratch where I knew, we had a system to do that. Now we don't. And we have to do it manually until we get a system, or I had a person who could do that was trained and had experience. Now I don't. So it's definitely been a big learning lesson about whether I want to do another. I don't think I got another startup in me. 4 is enough after this career, but it definitely, I've learned a lot from this time around.
I think I can appreciate that. It's funny. On one hand, So I'm one of those people that I love to sort of get my hands dirty. So like you, I feel like I'm more oriented towards the startup to mature startup business, right? Mm-hmm. At the moment that it's sort of we've gone from the pilot it to nail it. Now we're at the scale it phase. The moment it starts to crest into the milk it environment, I'm out. Like I'm not the right person. But I would say that it's been both frustrating and energizing to go from a very systematized, mature business back into that one where you're like, hey guys, we're not going to invest as much in technology at the moment because we need to get the process right. Technology is the enabler, not the solution, right? Like, and that can be certainly a pain.
But I think we undersell also. So not only starting a business from scratch with no employees, no systems, no technology, then I get into a partnership with 3 other wonderful men. But I undersold that that's 3 new marriages, right? Of getting to know them, getting to know how they work, getting to know how their brains work, what they're good at, what them learning myself as well. And you're doing this all at the same time. Yeah. So it's not like you only have to focus on one of those things at one time. And some days I look back at the last year and I wonder how we even made it through, right? But when you start to put in like, man, we did this, and this, all in that year time period, including fostering those relationships and building employees. And, some of my staffs, like, some departments, they had 1 person in it when we started, and now they're a team of 15. Yeah. And that happened in a year. And you forget that what that pain is like and what it's like to integrate and train and mentor. That takes a lot of time and effort. So some days I wonder, like, why are we doing this again, David? Why did we do it?
Because it's fun. Although I will say I'm noticing a theme, and I think maybe the title of the podcast will be like the polygamous dragon lady startup CEO or something. We're going to come up with something. There you go. I know we've been talking about a lot of the fun stuff, but I like to expose some of what I would call the challenges of running a business. So like, we often talk about the good stuff, the successes that we've had along the way, but can you tell us about a time that you maybe almost quit or felt like you really had your back against the wall, sort of paint a picture for what that looked like?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. I think
give us a good one.
In other podcasts, I've talked about some of the stuff that happened with Providence. So I'll talk about there were dark moments even in the startup, right? Where there was a moment I was looking in the mirror and I really thought, can I do this? And not from a standpoint of like, it's too hard, too many things. Do I even have the ability, right? And I started to doubt myself. And mainly because, I undersold what the effort and the amount of mental and emotional and all of those efforts. And one of my darkest moments was like standing in front of the mirror. It's Christmas time, right after I came off non-compete. And I remember texting my partners and saying, maybe I'm not the one. Maybe this isn't for me. I don't know if I'm the right partner for you. And the amount of doubt that I had around myself. And of course, I got back text messages from all of them that were super uplifting and amazing. But I definitely think I went through an entire year, David, since that point of really wondering who I was again, because, you develop this persona of yourself. I sell the company. Everybody says I'm successful, right? And I remember thinking, like, am I just a one-hit wonder? Was I just lucky? Like, maybe I don't really know how to do anything. Because the other thing that happens when you're a CEO, you become really good at directing, but you start to lose those kind of like as your organization matures, you lose those skills, right? Because now you have a team of people to do that where you might have done it for yourself before. So I definitely went through and it was an entire year. I felt like it was an entire dark year of really doubting my abilities. I did do something for myself, though. I invested in a happiness coach. I call him my happiness coach. I actually don't know what kind of coach he is. He's a coach, but I call him my happiness coach. And I started to work on what is it in Theresa's brain that, I would succeed on something and still I was still in this dark moment of like, do I have these abilities? And I knew that at some level it was all mindset, right? So I started to work on healing some of that stuff from the past of like, being able to show up in my greatest power now. And it took me a year.
Yeah.
So, I don't think they talk about the darkness enough. I think great podcasters like yourself that the good is everybody wants to be your friend when it's good. Everybody wants to do business with you when it's good. But when things aren't good, where is everybody? Right. And those are, I think, I hear a lot of entrepreneurs talk about being lonely at the top. And there are moments when you hit a certain level of success that you look around and you have less people surrounding you than you did just 5 years ago when you had less money, and you start to wonder, like, is it me?
Yeah.
Did I do this? Right? Like, am I changing? Is the world changing? I think I realized like everything has a time and a season. But yeah, it kind of took me a year to get my confidence back and remember that my resume and the things that I have done are me, and I'm not a one-hit wonder, and that I really do have skills. I just need to sharpen the blade again.
Yeah.
Some of them are rusty.
Well, I think, it's funny, things change really, really quickly. But I think a lot of entrepreneurs feel that imposter syndrome, right? Mm-hmm. And I have to admit, I felt the same way when I talked about leaving Guidant to start Doxa and sort of go back into the startup environment, as you were talking about a minute ago. Yeah. There were definitely moments where I felt like, oof, do I have this in me again? Am I the right person to do this? And I think that's really natural. In fact, I actually think it's a really good thing, because if you didn't have that, I wonder if you'd have the same drive or the same ambition or the same sort of like thrust that entrepreneurs need to have, especially in the early stages of a business. But, and I also think that a lot of us lose our identity in the business becomes us. And so, you talking about exiting, I know so many entrepreneurs that have sold their business and then wondered, wait, who am I? It's kind of like parents when kids, leave the house and then they're like, wait, who are you again? And why are we married? Because we're so used to investing in them, right? So.
Well, I remember the first time somebody asked me for my business card after I sold and I was no longer working with the organization. And I went in my car and I cried. I was like, well, who am I if I'm not the CEO of Provident Trust Group, right? And I really felt like, here I have money in the bank, I have all these things but how do I feel so empty? Like, how do I feel like less? I said all in one day, I became unimportant.
Yeah.
And I've talked to other entrepreneurs about that feeling, and they all kind of connect to the important piece of it. But, you start to realize that your importance comes from other things, and it takes time to work through that. But a lot of us entrepreneurs, including myself, we attach our importance to how well our business is doing and being a part of that, Yeah.
So true. Well, as you know, the podcast, the title of this podcast is "The Future is Borderless," and the whole concept is that the world is constantly changing and changing. And my belief is that we have to sort of break conventional thinking, both in how we live and how we lead, in order for us to sort of continue to evolve and survive, but even more so than that, thrive in like a rapidly changing world. I'm just curious, like, is there any place in your life where you think you're really sort of pushing the envelope or changing the status quo or doing things differently than most?
I do think on my leadership style, I get told a lot that I lead with a lot of heart. And I get told multiple times by people who come into our organization and hear the talks that what I'm doing in the company, people don't do, which I always found that kind of weird, because I know people like you and I know how you lead, and maybe I've surrounded myself with entrepreneurs who lead with that piece. But what I'm starting to find is that they think that this is a odd way of leading. And the odd piece around it, I think, is that I'm just as invested in the financial outcome and the results of the business as I am in developing out my people to just be better humans. And so we do a lot of work. I have Tuesday morning meetings, and I've had them almost now for 20 years at Provident. I continued the tradition over at Digital Trust. And I don't talk about the results of the business. I don't talk about like everything that we're doing wrong. Maybe some days I take over Tuesday morning to talk about that when I become Dragon Lady. But I usually use Tuesday morning, and we work through I bring in speakers to talk to them about like how to be a better parent, or what are their goals in life, or something that maybe we learned in YPO or EO as an entrepreneur, and I bring that back and say, hey, I learned this and it made me a better person. They think I'm really open as well, because I talk about my healing journey and my vulnerability really openly and directly. And sometimes, the level of directness and openness I have, people they giggle because they can't believe I actually said that out loud, right? And just sharing that journey with people, like, doing healing. And I even shared with my team, like, I went and did a psychedelic healing journey because somebody had told me about it and said it was really cool. And I shared it with my team. And I remember, HR saying, I don't know that you can talk about that. And I'm like, why can't we? Right? Why can't we talk about that? And then the amount of people that came up to me afterwards that wanted to read the book I read about that or get the website to that, it was astounding, the amount of people who felt connected to that talk. And it was just Theresa talking about being Theresa and part of her journey, right? So I feel like I didn't realize that was weird. And then now people are telling me this is a strange but awesome way to lead. And I just really hope that this becomes like contagious, right? That we don't have to lead through just numbers and results. We can also lead with, I let someone go last week and help them find a new job. And, I know people like you would do that, but there are a lot of people out there, once they're out of your organization, they don't care. But my belief is if you walk through the doors of digital trust, I hope you walk out a better person. And the digital trust may just be a stepping stone to the next part of your career, the next part of your life. It may be, the next 10 years, it may be only 3 months. But I just hope like we bring value to each other. And then when you walk out those doors, you can say, this place made me a better person, right? And I didn't realize that was weird, David, but I'm being told that that's a strange way of leading.
Well, I think, it's interesting. I don't think a lot of leaders lead with that sort of transparency and vulnerability and care about connecting with their people. But it's funny, there's a book that I read years ago called The Alliance. And the whole concept there was that, when people come to your organization, you should think about it as sort of a tour of duty. And the idea is you sign up for 2 years in this role. And my job as a leader is to develop you to take on the next opportunity. And it may be within our business, but it might also be outside the business. And if we take it from that perspective, that we develop people into being better individuals and better professionals, the likelihood is they'll grow within your organization. But if not, they're still growing. And you know what? They'll still be great advocates for anyone else outside the organization. I remember reading that book and just thinking it was so philosophically aligned with who I want to be that I constantly think about that. As you were talking, I was thinking, that is exactly, what you described.
You're connecting to the word borderless. And I think COVID taught more entrepreneurs this than any time else, right? Yeah. Is that when I'm talking about this type of leadership, is there is no border from the time they leave our office to the time they go home. They just are I had a HR director said that we're human first, right? Well, you're human first, and then you come, and it could be a job, it could be a passion, it could be all these things, but there is no border there. They still are parents, and they still are spouses, and they still are people who love to go out and play baseball or have some sort of hobby, or, I have someone who loves to do marathons and does, like they still are this other person. And the idea that companies still believe that there's this line, that they walk across this line and they're just supposed to be a professional. And if I hear that one more time, it's like, you can be a professional and human at the same time, right?
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. Who inspires you today? Like when you think about it, clearly you're a lifelong learner. I mean, in addition to looks like a JD, maybe 16 degrees, and a member of EO, YPO. Like, who inspires you? What are you learning right now? And tell me a little bit about that.
I'm always I probably have a laundry list of entrepreneurs that inspire me that are doing like the impact investing or starting up companies that really are pushing social change and things like that. I think, there's probably a laundry list of successful people that I could say that, their lives and their inspiration are really interesting. At this point in my life, I turned 44 this August. I find myself like looking at my kids. So I have a 9 and 11-year-old son, and my 9-year-old has this like just like passion and zest and love of life that somewhere along the way I was like, wow, where did I lose that or temper it? Or, like what happened where I don't see the world like he sees it, you know? And so I find myself finding inspiration now. Like I think my entire career, I always look to people who are doing better than me professionally or financially or that. And I think now I'm just looking at people who are inspiring me, who are doing better at life than me. Right. And my 9-year-old is doing better at life than me. And I think I'm in this path of kind of rediscovery of like, how do I get back to like, people say, how do we get back to our source? Right. Like why are we here? And I think I connected with you over breakfast a couple months ago, and it was just heart filling for me, just that conversation. I don't know that you realize just that conversation of us. We've been through a lot of life together. We were sharing the last few years of our journey. And there are just some parts of life that you're doing better than me, David, that I took away. And that's what's inspiring me to me now. And it doesn't have to be the most successful, the richest, it's not those people that are inspiring me today. It's the people that you're just looking at. It's like, wow, they just look really happy,
Yeah. I love it.
Fulfilled, or there's this word that is on my bucket list, contentment. It's a word that I felt I would never reach. And I feel closer to that word at closing in on 44 than I think I've ever felt my entire life. It's those kind of people, because I don't think, I'll tell you 100%, the money in the bank didn't change anything. My life didn't change. I guess things are easier. I can buy certain things that I couldn't before, or do certain things that I couldn't before. I have maybe a little bit more freedom, but my life was just as beautiful before the money ever hit the bank. Right. So
isn't it funny? Like we spend like our 20s and our 30s are all about achieving. And maybe it's not so much the age, maybe it's parenthood also. But I do feel like when I transitioned in my 40s that I started to think about life a little bit differently. And funny, you said something a second ago. I have obviously younger kids. My kids are 3.5 and 5, 2 little girls. And, we go on little walks, and it's amazing how they're so good at stopping and appreciating every little moment. I can't tell you how many pretty rocks and dandelions and sticks that I've enjoyed over the last few years. And I think as an entrepreneur, I've had a really hard time stopping and enjoying the moments because I was always looking at what we could achieve next. So yeah, what you said really resonated for me. Hey, we're getting close to the end of our time. I do want to ask you one more question though. And this is just because I know a lot of the people that listen to the podcast are entrepreneurs and or would like to become a business owner someday, whether starting or buying one, doesn't really matter. But I'm curious if you were to give yourself, go back to the 25-year-old self, 5-6 years ago. And just curious, like what advice would you give yourself now?
So somebody taught me about core values kind of in the middle of my career, and we set them for the company. Somewhere along the way, I figured out that the core values that I set for the company were actually mine, and how I feel and operate as a person. And I would really suggest that, listen, you're going to be given lots of opportunity. They always say luck is preparation meets opportunity, right? And you're going to be given lots of opportunity. You're going to meet lots of great people. But if you can get really good at knowing who you are, what you want, and what's driving you, those core values of life, like, find the yes is one of mine, an attitude of gratitude, because it's really important to me to be working with people who see the glass as half full and are looking for solutions, and people who are just grateful for being a part of a team or being here. And I just realized that is a big part of who I am. One of my also personal core values is we pull up, and because I worked for people and worked with people, that shoving your face into the dirt gave them joy, right? And I was always one of those entrepreneurs and leaders that they'll always tell you, Theresa doesn't fire anybody for making a mistake, and I haven't. Even people who made $1 million mistakes in my company, I see what maybe I contributed to that problem. I pick them up, dust them off, let them know that like we're going to do this together. And it's really important to me that I work with people who have that mentality and not people who find joy in other people's misery. If I, at 25 years old, if I had sat down and really wrote that out, I think I would have made some better decisions in my career, with people I decide to work with, businesses, etc. I think my life may have been a little bit easier if I had my compass, I guess, because I spent a lot of my 20s and early 30s not really understanding that those were my core values and realizing that, wow, that I did business with this person, but my gut told me I shouldn't. Why did I do business with that person? Right. And then when I look back at my core values that I have now, they violated 4 or 5 of them. Right. And, I just wish way back then I had that compass. I think I could have made a lot better decisions, but I got a multi-million-dollar education outside of my 4 degrees. I got that $100 million education from being an entrepreneur.
That's amazing. Well, I think anyone that has owned or operated a business before would totally understand what you're saying. There's so many times where I've realized when things have not gone well, I've violated some value or values of mine in the past. So, all right, well, we'll leave it there. We've been talking to Theresa Fette, who's the CEO of Digital Trust. Theresa, where can people go to learn a little bit more about you and the work you're doing?
You can go to www.digitaltrust.com or bitcoinira.com.
Awesome. All right. Well, thanks again for being on the show.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Future is Borderless podcast with David Nilsson. Be sure to click subscribe to future episodes so you can hear from more top entrepreneurs and thought leaders. And we'll see you again next time.